Hello Dungeon Masters and RPG enthusiasts. Today we're going to be covering how to award and also how to create magical items for your D&D 5e campaigns. There's a lot of stuff to get through today, so let's go ahead and get started. You're watching The Dungeon Geek. Hey, if you're watching this video, there's a really good chance that you're trying to learn more about the topic of the title of the video, which is how to award magical items to your players, or how to create magical items in D&D 5e. I'm just going to give a bit of a disclaimer here before we begin, which is I'm just one person. I'm just one Dungeon Master. These are bits of advice that are kind of rooted in my gameplay experience. I try to take a pragmatic approach to how I create bits of advice or even homebrew rules. I try to make sure everything's rooted either in my experience or in the rules of the game itself. So that being said, if you don't like the tips that I have here, feel free to comment down below. If you do like them, feel free to comment down below to share this material to other people or a GM that you think might find this useful. And hopefully, when we're all done arguing with each other or patting each other on the back, something good has come of it, and we've grown as a GM, and we're creating better experiences for our players. So let's go ahead and get started talking about, first and foremost, awarding magical items. If you're a new GM and you've not had a whole lot of experience running the game, it can be really tempting to just hand out a ton of magical items to your players, and then the whole game gets tossed on its side, and what the heck has gone wrong? My players are so super powerful, and they're just running through everything that I throw at them, or they don't respect the magical items that I've given them, and they just want more, and they're always trying to murder hobo everybody so that they can attempt to get even more magical items, or they're trying to steal from vendors, and they're turning into the villains of the campaign, and the whole thing has gone off the rails. Maybe this is your fault as a GM. It is really easy to overlook the fact that when you're creating an encounter using the encounter building rules that are in the Dungeon Master Guide or in the Monster Manual, the CR calculations that they give you do not take into consideration the fact that your party has magical items. It doesn't account for them having 4 or 1 or 11. It just doesn't consider them at all. So any magical items that your characters have at any given level is going to give them a bonus or some sort of a buff against whatever CR that it is that you're challenging them up against. So that being said, be careful how many items, or be aware of how many items and powers and extra abilities they happen to have from the treasure that they found when building your encounters, or they could not be tough enough and your players could just breeze right through them. So the boss that you've been building up to may not be strong enough to fight your players because you're assuming that they are, fighting a deadly counter at CR 13, when in fact they'd be able to take on something that's CR 15 because of how much gear they have. I'm not saying that you shouldn't give your magical items, to your players either. It's not like, they shouldn't have any. That's not what I'm saying. Just be aware of how many it is that they have. For more information on this, there's this really good sidebar on page 136 of Xanathar's Guide to Everything that kind of discusses this a little bit more in depth. Kind of on a side note, as far as monsters are concerned, there are monsters as low as CR1, like a Spectre, that is immune to non-magical weapons. And if your characters are that low to where they're fighting a CR1 monster, and this is sort of like the big bad for one of the opening adventures at low levels, not having a magical sword, at least one of the players not having a magical sword, is going to be really challenging and problematic for them. So they're going to have to find another way to defeat this creature if they haven't found a magic item yet. Maybe that's what you want. Maybe you want them to overcome this thing and be at odds against it because it possesses resistances that they're unable to bypass. But that's for you as a Dungeon Master to decide. Moving on, let's figure out how to award these magical items in a very simple way. Every DM, new and old, should understand that the official rules in 5e for awarding magical items are inside the Dungeon Master's Guide, and this is Chapter 7, which starts on page 133. Within Chapter 7, there's this one other thing that I should mention. Several times throughout it, they mention how difficult it should be for your players to purchase or sell magical items in most game worlds. There's a reason that this is in there. It's so that they don't just go and rob vendors of magical items and power level themselves by acting heinous, or it's so that they don't have to stay within the safety of a city. It's enabling you to sow the seeds of adventures so that they have to go out and find legendary items that were lost in caverns or in crypts or have been stolen by powerful organizations like bandits or orc tribes. It allows your characters to go on adventures, which is really the purpose of the game. I've made a mistake a few times in my games by having too robust of sort of a magical item shop inside a city, and the players begin to expect new items to come in, and they expect the vendors to constantly, bend to their every whim to get them the item that they particularly want, that they know about because they've read the Dungeon Master Guide, and this isn't the way that the game should be played, in my opinion. If your players are wanting items that are customized specifically for their character, maybe you need to step back as a GM and figure out, well, how have I not rewarded them, or how can I get them to go on a quest where they feel the benefits of being rewarded and get something that they want. That might be a better way of doing it, other than kind of bowing to their desires in a general store inside a city. All right, went on a tangent there, but back on chapter 7 inside the DMG. It is full of tables. And these tables basically allow you to roll for what magical items that your characters might receive if they're fighting an individual monster at a given CR, or they find a treasure trove or like a layer of a monster or a group of monsters at a given CR. And so you just roll against the tables and you'll find a plethora of different types of items. One of the things that is easy to overlook, even for experienced GMs, is that the magical items, weapons, and armor that are listed on these tables have power levels associated to them. There are rarities. There's common, uncommon, rare, and legendary items. But even among those 4 different tiers of rarity, there's also minor items and major items. This was kind of fleshed out a little better in previous editions, or in like Pathfinder is fleshed out a little bit better. But one of the things that you should consider is that if you're rolling on tables A through E, these are considered minor magical items, even though some of the items can be rare or legendary or uncommon. And then likewise, if you're rolling on tables F through I, these are major magical items. These are also kind of across the gamut of uncommon to legendary items, but these are the ones that they consider more powerful. More on this later. And once you've kind of graduated from rolling on random tables to establish what it is your characters have found, then you may want to start curating a list of items for your particular set of players, or your campaign, or the encounters that you're running based upon what environment or what creatures they're fighting. And one of the ways that you can kind of get your head wrapped around this is look at chapter 2 in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, starting on page 135. Their rules for magic items goes into great length about how to curate your own lists, and kind of separates items by tier based on your character's level and how many they should receive during the course of an adventure. And this is a really good way to kind of hone in on what or how many magical items from the DMG and Volo's Guide and the different adventure path artifacts and magic items that are available to pull into your game, and then kind of put them into a rollable table of your own. And then that way you're not going to get like a Horn of Blasting when you don't necessarily need it, or you're not going to get like a Potion of Giant Strength in an area that doesn't have any giants. Those kinds of things can be avoided by curating your own list. Now, the third way to do this, the third step, the final step of graduation, is to actually create your own magical items. Items that are not in the DMG, items that are not in Xanathar's Guide to Everything, things that are your own. And this is where it starts to get really fun, and you're able to really start to customize things for your own personal needs, tastes, and players' desires. One of the very simplest ways that you can create unique magical items for your game is the reskin. All right, and so this is just reskinning the description of an existing item in the book. So for examples, you could take the Wand of Secrets, and then you could turn that into the Ring of Secrets. You just describe it differently. Its effects are exactly the same. You can literally copy paste and just change the word wand to ring, and there you go. You've got your own unique magical item. Now, this is a little boring, but effective. The next kind of way that you can do this is to copy a item formula. So for instance, you've got a wand, and the wand has 7 charges, and you can use the charge to cast this one first level spell. And the first level spell, like Magic Missile, scales, and you can cast it at a higher level, but if you use all the charges, there's a chance the wand might disintegrate before it recharges again in the morning. Well, it doesn't have to be a wand. Maybe it's a bracer, or maybe it's an oven mitt, or maybe it's a hat. Instead of Magic Missile, maybe it's casting Scorching Ray, or instead of Scorching Ray, it's casting Sleep. And then the charges then affect at what level, again, the spell is cast, and then instead of disintegrating it, it burns into flame, and then kind of evaporates into the sky, into ash. So you've basically copied this formula that already works. It's already been mechanically vetted for by the playtest staff, and then just kind of swapped a few things around, and then boom, unique magic item. The third way, truly unique magic items. These are things that do not exist in the DMG. They do not exist in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. They're completely unique to you and your campaign. So how do we do this? This is going to take a little bit of creativity and curiosity and some paperwork on your end. There's a couple things that I would suggest doing right off the bat. Figure out what it is that you would like to do with this magic item. Is it offset a deficiency that the party has? Is there some skill that their particular group is lacking, and you want to give them a magic item that would allow them to kind of bolster this skill once a day? Okay? Or is it your character needs a bonus because he's slightly underpowered, and you want to give this one particular character something that's going to kind of buff him up just a little bit? Or is it something that has to do with the plot of the campaign itself, and then you need this item to come in a very dramatic fashion? Perhaps they steal it from someone, and this particular item does something that allows the plot to move forward. These are kind of considerations that you need to make. The second thing that you really need to consider is the power level of the item that you're creating. And a good way to gauge this is to kind of just make some notes, figure out what it is that you really want to create, and then consult the DMG and Xanathar's Guide to Everything and really figure out where this item stacks up. You can use the rarity and major minor tables to kind of act as a barometer to figure out what power level this item is in consideration to the other things that already legally exist within the printed D&D 5e world. So there are going to be minor items, and if you want to look for minor items, look at tables, again, like I said, A through E in the DMG. These are all minor items, even though they span the gamut from common to legendary and rarity. And then there are also the major items from tables F through I, which I believe, again, span the gamut from probably uncommon to legendary. Figure out where in that kind of graph your magic item fits. Are the players high enough level to get your magic item yet, or is it going to disrupt the game? Do they have to quest for it? Is it something that they hear about in level 5 and they're able to quest for and grasp by level 10? That's for you to decide. And then go ahead and take a couple of items similar in power level to the item you're creating, and also similar in description, something that is comparable so that you're able to figure out, is this, not going to break the game. The last little bit of advice that I would give you is when you're creating unique magical items for your game, once you've kind of established the theme and the setting and what it is that this magic item does, or think about who created it or what its purpose was or where it ended up, and is it cursed, is it blessed, then look through all of the mechanical aspects of the game as a whole. I mean, the strangest things can become cool and unique magical bonuses mechanically to your characters. An item that adds movement speed, perhaps an item that adds passive perception while they're sleeping, or an item that allows them to make perception checks at advantage during certain circumstances, like if they're using their sense of smell. All of these tiny little weird, quirky things can become unique one-off magic items that your player characters will be able to use in very fun and creative ways. Overall, I think the golden rule for magic item creation in this game is not to overcomplicate the new items that you create. Use the existing rules and mechanics of the game as a roadmap, and try to add things to the game with these new items that your characters cannot potentially do as a group. One of the great things that you could do is figure out, well, there are certain spell class abilities that are not covered in this particular configuration of player characters. Perhaps if there's not a warlock in the group, adding a single item that has a once-a-day ability that allows you to cast a warlock spell is going to add just enough variety to the game to make things fresh and interesting. Plus, you can add some really cool kind of eldritch flavor to this item. Perhaps they found it in a crypt or inside of an abandoned alchemist's lab or something cool like that. It's up to you. I leave you with this. As a player, finding magical items inside D&D is part of the game. It's very fun. It's very rewarding. As a DM, handing out these magical items after players have earned them is also very rewarding. The reward part and the earned part should be synonymous. Don't be giving your players items for the sake of giving your players items because they want them. Everybody wants things. This is a game where you have to earn things. This is a game where you have to risk things. So if you're going to give your player characters a rare or legendary item, make them earn it. Make them risk death. Make them grow as role players and as people playing a cooperative storytelling game so that they're able to tell these stories for years to come and look back fondly upon the campaigns that they played with you. Hey, thank you so much for watching. I'd love to hear from you directly about your comments regarding magical items, rewarding them and creating them in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Feel free to comment on the YouTube channel itself or visit me on my blog, thedungeongeek.wordpress.com. I've also created a new Instagram account where I'm going to be sharing things. It's going to be @thedungeongeek. And until next time, thank you so much for watching. This has been The Dungeon Geek.